Hey everyone, I'd like to welcome you back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website is theclinicaltrialsguru.com. The best place on the internet to find clinical trial information, content, I like to call it. It's mostly video. We do tons of video interviews with people who have either participated in clinical trials before or people who work in the industry and are generally considered the thought leaders of the industry. We do tons of interviews with both of those groups. In addition to that, myself and Don also do these solo videos where we kind of talk about one topic at a time within the clinical trial industry. And in addition to that, you want to check out the ebook that I have. It's a written content for those of you who like the written content. Today's question that I'm going to focus on: who participates in clinical trials? And I get asked this question a lot, believe it or not. It's, people who may be considering joining clinical trials, even in my day job at South Coast Clinical Trials, people who have never done trials before ask me, who participates in clinical trials? What type of people? And there is no answer to this. It's everyone participates in clinical trials, many different types of people. I shouldn't say everyone, I should say it's very diverse. There's not a particular group that tends to do clinical trials more than others, although there's been recent studies that have shown that males participate a lot more frequently than women. And we've talked about this before in a separate video. So check that out. That's some food for thought there for you guys. But back to the question, who participates in clinical trials? Many different types of people. Some are healthy, some have the medical illness. The healthy volunteers, they do the phase 1 studies, and there is no direct benefit to them for doing a trial. In other words, they're not doing a trial to get treatment. They're doing a trial to either advance medicine, and usually these guys are doing it for the money. They do offer pretty good compensation on these healthy volunteer clinical trials because there's no other real benefit for them to do these trials, and other than altruism, where they feel like they're giving back something to society. And these participants, we've interviewed lots of them on our program. Just do a search on our blog for Healthy Volunteer. You can also search for Phase 1, that's PHASE 1, and you'll see the interviews we've done, and you can hear firsthand accounts of why some of these healthy volunteers do clinical trials. But those are the phase 1 studies. Now, for the most part, those are just a very small percentage of clinical trials. The larger part of clinical trials, I would say over 90% of clinical trials out there require patients to participate. That means people who have the medical condition that's being studied. So if it's a study for diabetes, you're going to enroll patients with diabetes in that trial. If you have a study for asthma, people with asthma are going to join that trial. If you're doing a study for depression, people with depression, and on and on. So these are the most common type of clinical trials. Now the benefits for these patients, or people I should say, is there are some benefits other than receiving payment and just pure altruism. Many times these people get access to the latest treatments that are not yet approved by the FDA, but will be approved soon or may be approved soon in many cases. And sometimes they're doing studies where drugs have already been approved. They're just getting more data. These would be the phase 4 studies. We've done a lot of these kind of studies at South Coast Clinical Trials. So there's many different reasons to do a clinical trial. It's not all about altruism and giving back. It's not all about getting paid money to join. Sometimes people really do look for treatments. Sometimes people have tried everything out there and nothing seems to be working, or the side effects are kind of nasty, and so they want to try other things. And that's where clinical trials comes in as well. It provides new options for these people to seek treatment. And at the same time, they may receive payment, and of course it does help other people. So The patient participants, that's really the bread and butter of clinical trials. That's really where most of the action takes place. And so, for the most part, outside of the healthy volunteers, patients with real medical conditions are joining clinical trials. And then we get into how all clinical trials have inclusion-exclusion criteria. So just because you may be a patient and you may want to join a trial, it doesn't mean you'll get in. There's different factors that allow someone to participate in clinical trials. So if your blood pressure is over a certain amount, or your BMI or your weight is over a certain amount, or you have other medical conditions, sometimes you may not be allowed to join the trial. These are called inclusion-exclusion criteria. Every single trial is different, so you definitely want to ask your doctor or the study staff what the inclusion-exclusion criteria are and see if you can get in. That's basically all I have to say. And there is one more group of people that's kind of a subset of the patient volunteers that do trials, and that's people with life-threatening illnesses. And oftentimes I see this a lot in the cancer patients. Nothing's really worked, and unfortunately they only have a little bit of time left before the cancer completely takes over. And so these people often see clinical trials as kind of a last resort. And we've interviewed oncologists on the show before, and so if you're interested in that subset of patient volunteers, definitely check that out. Just do a search for oncologist. But this group usually seeks clinical trials as kind of a last resort, and the inclusion-exclusion criteria for these trials is often pretty strict, so you get a lot of disappointed people who, were hoping to get into that clinical trial, were hoping for a miracle, and many times they don't get in, and that's one of the unfortunate parts of the cancer clinical trials. But for the most part, hopefully this helps answer the question, who participates in clinical trials? And keep the questions coming, and we're going to keep answering them as best as we can. Thanks a lot for watching. This is Dan from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.